Good morning and welcome to Football League World TV. This morning we're going to be kicking off today's schedule with a Blackburn debate show after the Rovers have made such an impressive start to the Championship season. I'm your host Marcus Alley and I'm delighted to be joined by my Football League World colleague and Blackburn Rovers fan Toby Wilding. How are you doing this morning, Toby?
Yeah, I'm real good, thanks. As you say, it's been a fantastic start to the season, so that certainly always helps the mood. And yeah, going to be really good to sort of take a bit of a more in-depth look at what's been going on at Ewood Park so far, because for me, there's plenty to talk about.
Certainly was a summer of change at Ewood Park, and we're going to be touching on a lot of bases in and around that in today's show. Just before we get into the first topic of this debate, though, I'm going to ask you to please get involved in the comments section. I can put some of your questions and comments to Toby, and please do support the channel by dropping a like on the video. All the support is very much appreciated. But without further ado, let's start with the manager, the man in the dugout, out with Tony Mowbray, in with Jon Dale Thompson. Obviously, 3 wins from 3 in the league, a 4-0 victory over League Two's Hartlepool United in the Carabao Cup as well. Just to start with, obviously not focusing on results too much at this stage of the season. In terms of performances and style of play, what in particular have you noticed that's changed from the Tony Mowbray era to how Thompson started at Blackburn?
Yeah, it's a good question, that, and I think that there has been some really noticeable changes that we've seen. I think one thing is the sort of the grit that we sort of really saw on Sunday in particular, the way that that side with such a makeshift defence, which we'll come on to a bit more later on, I'm sure, was able to sort of see out that 2-1 lead against West Brom for what was over 40 minutes in the end, with, as I say, a defence that was absolutely out on its feet, ravaged by injuries, and yet somehow, this side just seemed to manage to see it out, and that's something we saw again on the opening day of the season, a 1-0 win against QPR. It just feels like they've got that sort of extra sort of mentality that is going to help get them across the line in certain games this season. As I say, both of those two are ones that I think in previous seasons we would probably have seen Rovers drawn or potentially even lost from the situation that they were in. I think as well, another thing that's interesting me is sort of the style of play, as you say, that we're seeing from Rovers. I think in fairness to Tony Mowbray, there was always, certainly towards maybe the latter stages of his time in charge at Rovers, there was an emphasis on that attacking possession-based style of play we saw at times, and I think that has sort of come into effect at times this season. There's maybe been certainly the Swansea game where it isn't as much of the case. Rovers are happy to let the opposition team have the ball, but then when they are in possession, what I get that feeling of is there's a lot more sort of intent with it. Every pass, it's slick, it's one-touch football, and it's always with that intent of getting the ball forward and making sort of every pass matter, almost, in terms of really trying to force Blackburn forward and put that opposition defence under threat as much as possible. So I think that as well feels like something of a change in a positive way in terms of how things have gone for Rovers so far this season on the pitch.
Okay, potentially a slightly more direct approach, at least in possession then. Looking back, taking you back to pre-season and what your expectations were for the campaign, still in terms of the eye test and what the side has looked like now the Championship has kicked off, has it lived up to your expectations in terms of the way that they're going about things? Still very much settling in to Thomason's ideas, or were you expecting this sort of approach and to very much play out the way it has?
In terms of sort of style of play, yes, I think this is always sort of the way that it felt like Thomason was going to play. In terms of, if you sort of look at what the expectation was, given what he'd done at Malmo, you thought that was going to be that sort of emphasis would be on the attacking exploitation of the fullbacks, which is something we've seen. There's quite often that desire to get it out wide, as seemed to be a feature, as I say, for Thomason at Malmo. In terms of the actual results, if I'm being honest, this has probably gone beyond what I thought we'd see. I mean, it was a solid pre-season, but not a spectacular one by any means. So to then come off of that and hit the ground running as emphatically as they have, particularly when it's been, again, something we'll come on to a bit more later, I'm sure, a quiet transfer window. The fact that even with that sort of almost, holding the side back to some extent in terms of the options there is to sort of overcome all that, and start so strongly, particularly again on Sunday, West Brom with the way they were playing, coming into this one with a squad they have, the expectations there is on them. I didn't sort of look at those 3 opening games as 3 where I would say I think Rovers will come away with 9 points, and if I'm being honest, I don't think anyone really would have done. So while I was expecting something solid, and I weren't bracing myself for a disaster or a 0 point sort of situation, I don't think there was many who were sort of expecting this team to be playing with quite this confidence and quite so effectively, given everything they're having to deal with quite so soon. And I think that's a huge credit to Thomason that he's been able to get this sort of performance and grit and determination to grind out results as quickly as he has.
So 4 wins from 4, despite maybe not ideal transfer dealings so far. We're going to be touching on some of those performances in a little bit more detail next. So Rovers kicked off the campaign with a 1-0 win at home to QPR. Lewis Travis with a memorable goal after a long goal drought. Then the 3-0 win at Swansea, where Blackburn really made hay on the counter-attack in that one. A 4-0 win over Hartlepool in the League Cup. And then, of course, the most recent 2-1 victory at home to West Bromwich Albion. If there's been a standout performance of those 4, obviously Swansea, the most impressive scoreline, what would it be for you, Toby, and why?
I mean, to be honest, I think I could pick out most of them games for different reasons that they impressed me. As you say, I think the Swansea game, the ruthlessness that Rovers showed on the counter attack in particular was just hugely encouraging. The way they approached that game, they let Swansea play their style and they coped so well. So sort of in that sense, from a tactical perspective, that is the one that sort of really stands out for me in terms of the spirit, the fight. As I say, West Brom on Sunday, playing as they did with such a makeshift defence with a central midfielder and 2 left backs in a back 4, to sort of see that out for 40 minutes of an absolute onslaught as it was just hugely impressive in that respect. And as I say, I think if I'm being honest, when that shot went in from Grady Diangana via that deflection, I'll be honest, I was thinking West Brom are going to win this 3-2. So for Rovers to sort of see that out in the way they did is massively encouraging. And I think as well the Hartlepool game, in a sense, yes, it was just a cup game and it's sort of 2 divisions difference. But again, it was massively rotated the squad, 10 changes to the starting lineup from the Swansea win the weekend before. So to then see not necessarily the depth as such in terms of because of who you are facing, but the mindset and the approach of those players who very much, it seems, second choice at this moment in time. Obviously that could change to sort of really still go out there and put in such an emphatic performance and show that desire to win the way they went about their business there was again hugely encouraging. And I think that just sort of shows the mentality that Thomason has already instilled into this squad in terms of the sort of the will to win and to impress. So as I say, there's certainly plenty of encouraging performances, but if I was going to go for one overall, I think I'll have to go for West Brom, given the expectation and the quality of opposition that Rovers were facing there. To get that win in such difficult circumstances really does have to stand out for me.
So we've almost seen a different side to the Blackburn squad in all 4 results. Just looking ahead to the next couple of fixtures this week, I believe it's Reading and Sheffield United on your travels. Obviously, Reading, sort of 2 teams expected to be competing in different areas of the table this season. Something of an injury crisis or a lack of defenders in the squad to contend with at the moment. After starting with the season with a 100% record. What are your expectations from these two fixtures? Obviously, Sheffield United away, possibly one of the toughest away days in the calendar as well.
Yeah, it's a couple of tough fixtures. Reading, as you say, that does feel like something of a standout to target. With all due respect, when you look at the absolute beating they took at Rotherham on Saturday, it's one of them where you think if those sorts of results are happening, you do have to target those games. For being honest, I mean, Joe Lumley had a bit of a nightmare there, didn't he? So you sort of look at that as something you really have to be exploiting. And I think the likes of I'm sure Ben Brereton Diaz and Sam Gallagher will be really keen to try and take advantage of that to some extent. But then on the flip side, this is the Championship, and any result is possible in any game, isn't it? And as you say, that defensive sort of injury crisis that Rovers are facing will give an opportunity to Reading and Paul Ince, who I'm sure will be determined to get one over his former club again, as he did towards the back end of last season. So that one is definitely it's one that Rovers I'm sure will be looking at the results so far this season and thinking we should again be eyeing a 3 points here, but you can never sort of guarantee that by any stretch in the Championship. Sheffield United, that again is one that really stung Rovers towards the back end of last season. The Reda Kadra penalty miss and then the Ben Davies stoppage time winner for the 10 men of the Blades was another result that I think was probably a huge turning point in terms of Rovers' push for the playoffs. So there is certainly sort of the case for Rovers to have a great deal of incentive to go there and get 3 points, particularly again when you consider, as I say, Kadra now at Sheffield United, hugely popular at Rovers, so there's a bit of something there, and also the Anel Amahodzik transfer that's gone through Blackburn again. Big players in that one, weren't they? Obviously for Amahodzik, a former Thomason player at Malmo, and one who they could really do with right now, as I say, with the central defensive situation. So there's definitely feels like there's going to be some needle behind that game, but it will be a tricky assignment for Blackburn. Sheffield United are going to be one of them who do look like they should still be competing at the top end of the table this season. So it's not going to be an easy one, certainly. As I say, with the atmosphere as well that there is at Bramall Lane, it's something that's been so important for the Blades for so many years now. So that as you say, is going to be a really tricky test for Rovers. I think it is maybe one where you might argue, given those circumstances, and if they are still sort of waiting for these centre-back signings to come through by that point, one where you think, they would quite possibly be happy to come away with a point.
Yeah, definitely will be an interesting one to monitor if Rovers do come through the Reading test in midweek. We're going to be focusing on some of the individuals that have made this positive start possible in the next section. So Lewis Travis has taken on the armband this season after the departure of Darragh Lenihan to Millwall at the end of his Middlesbrough, at the end of his contract this summer. Been a standout performer for you so far. Obviously, a couple of very eye-catching goals against Swansea and QPR. Is he certainly a player up there that's been a standout performer for Rovers so far?
Oh, certainly. Travis has been absolutely brilliant. I think for starters, it was an absolute no-brainer in the eyes of many Blackburn fans that he would be the one to get the captain's armband once it became clear that Darragh Lenihan was going to move on. So I think for Thomason to sort of make that decision himself is, again, a really sort of smart move from him, and one that will have helped him in terms of getting that fan base on side quickly. And he has really stepped up to the mark for that. I mean, it's nothing new for Travis, but he is one of those who just, leads by example anyway on the pitch, with sort of the challenges that he's putting in, the commitment, the desire. It's sort of you want a captain to lead by example in that sense, and Travis certainly does that. And as you say, the goals have been an absolute massive bonus. I mean, he doesn't score many, but he doesn't score many goals. He doesn't score any scrappy ones at all. Any that he does produce are absolutely spectacular, and we've seen that again this season. So that is a really big bonus that he's sort of pitching in with those as well, because again, He's sort of looking at the makeup at this side, and he's very much one that you feel right now as a squad is reliant on Ben Brereton Diaz and Sam Gallagher to get the vast majority of the goals. So any that can sort of come from other players and other positions is going to be hugely welcome. And Travis has massively stepped up to the plate with that so far this season.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Ben Brereton Diaz has started strongly again, as he did last season. A really impressive finish in that 1-goal win over West Bromwich Albion. A really nice bit of play to score a goal on the counter attack against Swansea City. How good has it been to see him back to his best after what was a slightly disappointing, although injury hit second half to last season?
Yeah, it has been a massive relief. I think. I mean, obviously, I think that was very costly for me during the second half of last season. The fact that his form and his fitness dropped after January. It was only 2 goals he scored in the calendar year. The first half of the calendar year that made up the second half of last season, and you saw how badly that affected Rovers in terms of the way their results dropped off. So to have him back fit and firing on all cylinders is a massive relief. And I think it's one of them. It's not just his goals. I mean, you look at the assist he provided for Sam Gallagher for the second goal against West Brom on Sunday. That was an absolute brilliant piece of play. The run, the strength to sort of hold off Semi Ajayi, and then the ball into Gallagher was just perfect. A really sort of smart, the right pass at the right moment, and just allowed him to sort of apply a brilliant finish. So again, that's sort of the reminder that it's not just his goals where he does contribute. He can provide some more all-round play in terms of what he offers with his pace and he's just his desire. He will not stop running, so that gives defences so much to deal with as well. So yeah, it's again a huge relief to see him back to his best, and that has obviously been a massive factor in the start to the season being as strong as it has been.
So they're 2 players that have been key players at Ewood Park for a few years now. Outside of those, what other players have stood out in picking up these 9 points? Obviously, it's been impressive from a defensive standpoint as well as going forward.
Yeah, you mentioned defence there, and that's exactly where I was going to look. Daniel Ayala. I mean, to be fair to him, I don't really recall ever seeing him have a bad game in Blackburn colours. The issue has just been maintaining his fitness over the past couple of seasons, and it is one of them where watching how good he's been now, leading that defence with sort of the way he's been stepping up to that challenge, it does make me wonder how many more points could Blackburn have had in those last 2 seasons had he been fully fit for the whole campaign. And he's showing that now with how solid, how reliable he's been. He was brilliant in terms of helping Ash Phillips through the game on Sunday afternoon at West Brom. That was obviously a big challenge for a 17-year-old in his first championship appearance, and he really stepped up to the mark there. And I think having Ayala alongside him will certainly have helped. And I think, as I say, the fact that Ayala was the only fit natural defender in that natural centre back in that back four come the end of the game on Sunday, just shows sort of how well he's coping with those demands and how important he is to this side at the minute. And that is obviously a concern, given, as I say, the injury problems he's endured over the past couple of seasons. But it just highlights how important he is. And I do think if he can be kept fit, then he's certainly going to be a huge player for Rovers over the course of this season. And we're seeing that already, because I mean he's past 30 now, but he's not showing any signs of sort of slowing down when he is fit. He's so good, so strong in the air still. He's really sort of quick, alert to mop up those loose balls. There was a few times on Sunday where he was the man getting over, cutting out that danger, and it just sort of shows his nous at this level, and that is going to make him a really important player, as I say, if he stays available.
Some defensive reinforcements definitely required then between now and the end of the transfer window. But we're going to take a look at the 3 senior signings that Blackburn have made in this summer transfer window next. So to start with, Callum Britton, right back coming in from Barnsley, had quite a big reputation. Obviously, played a key role under Valérien Ismaël as the Tykes made it to the playoffs and finishing in 5th place in 2020-21. So came in with quite a big reputation, was expected to hit the ground running. Has he? What have you made of his start to life at Blackburn?
Yeah, I've been impressed. I mean, it was a big sort of move for him in terms of he's got some considerable shoes to fill following the departure of Ryan Nyambe, but I think he stepped up to that sort of role really well. In fairness, defensively, he's looked pretty solid so far going forward. I don't think we've quite seen all of it just yet, but I think, having seen him against QPR on the opening day and comparing that to what I saw from him at West Brom on Sunday, it feels like things are already starting to progress in the right direction in terms of what he's going to offer going forward, which will be a really big thing, I think, for Rovers, because as I sort of say, it looks like Thomason is going to sort of look for that attacking threat from out wide, and certainly that was part of the reason I'm sure that he was brought in, because of his ability in that sense. So the fact that is already starting to develop and become more a threat for Rovers is certainly really encouraging. So yeah, I think I've been impressed and encouraged. I feel like there's more to come from him, but I like what I've seen already. And again, the fact that it's a 4-year deal they've signed him to, and for what sounds like a sizable fee by Rovers standards, is encouraging, both in terms of the sort of the intent that it puts out, and also the fact that it means that there's plenty of time here for him to really sort of come to his best in Blackburn colours.
One signing that possibly raised some eyebrows after not too much regular Championship action over the last few years was Sammy Szmodics coming in for fairly big money from Peterborough United. An attack-minded midfielder, quite a versatile player as well. Hit the ground running, has been amongst the goals at least. What have you made of his start to life at Ewood Park?
Yeah, again, another promising signing so far. As you say, the fee and the length of contracts from an off-the-pitch perspective is certainly promising in terms of the intent and the time it gives for Rovers to get the best out of him. And on the pitch as well, it looks good. As you say, opening debut goal at Swansea, that's always a huge relief. It lifts a lot of pressure off an attacker. To start so strongly as he did. So already the confidence is going to be there. It was a different kind of game for him against West Brom on Sunday. As I say, Rovers were under the pump for significant periods of that match, so maybe we didn't get to really see him have those opportunities as much. But what still impressed me was that work rate, even when he wasn't maybe getting to create and take those chances as he would like. He was still really heavily involved in terms of chasing, putting that West Brom defence under pressure. And that, again, is the sort of thing you want to see from players when it's perhaps not a game that suits them, if there's, in terms of their natural style, if they are still there putting in those hard yards, then you're going to win the fans over and you're going to make an impact. And there were certainly occasions where Szmodics did, in terms of, that, as I say, that pressure that he was putting on the West Brom defence. It gave the Blackburn backline behind him that chance for a bit more of a breather, which was hugely important with sort of the effort that West Brom were throwing at them. So yeah, again, another sort of really encouraging start to life at Rovers for one of their new signings.
And thirdly, young Tyler Morton, the 19-year-old on loan from Liverpool, a player that hasn't probably been as involved as the previous two players that we've just mentioned, but have there been some promising signs in his first few appearances?
Oh, definitely. I think, as you say, he came in not later than the other two. It was actually the same day as Szmodics it was announced, but obviously he didn't quite have as much competitive football under his belt for the start of the season as Szmodics did. I think Szmodics obviously played in Peterborough's opening game. Morton had been restricted to friendlies for Liverpool, but even so, there's certainly promising signs there of the assist for Scott Wharton for the opening goal in the win over Hartlepool in the Cup. I said it at the time, Morton, it seems like, has been brought into that midfield to fill the Joe Rothwell role, and a corner to set up Scott Wharton to head home is something that Joe Rothwell became noted for towards the back end of last season. So that is certainly a promising comparison for Morton to be producing that so early on. And then again, he's one of them. He looks like he can do a bit of everything. You know, coming off the bench against West Brom on Sunday, as was the case with Smodics, it didn't really give him the chance to showcase what he can do from an attacking perspective because of the backs to the wall nature of the game for Rovers at that time. But again, he certainly played his part in terms of helping to keep West Brom back as much as possible. Some really sort of decent, solid challenges going in, some nice passes out for the back. So yeah, again, as has been the case quite often in Blackburn's transfer windows recently, the quality of players that seem to be coming in is very encouraging right now, in my opinion.
So still a fair way to go in the transfer window, just over 2 weeks, and Blackburn will definitely be looking to strengthen their squad in that time. I'm going to be checking in on Toby's ideals, who he would like to bring in, how many, and what areas that the club can strengthen next. So we've already touched on the need for some defenders centrally in particular as well, but are there any other areas of the pitch that need strengthening? And do you have a number in mind of maybe signings that Blackburn should ideally be looking to make between now and the end of the transfer window?
Yeah, I mean, one sort of quote that I do find interesting from Jan Dahl Thomason so far when talking about transfers is he's been sort of putting the emphasis on Blackburn losing 8 sort of first team players from last season, and so far having only brought in the 3 that we've just been talking about. So that to me sort of suggests maybe 5 more, and that is sort of a number that in fairness I do think I would be happy with. As we've sort of touched on, 2 centre-backs looks like a must, having lost 2 key players in that position with, as we say, Darragh Lenihan and also Jan-Paul van Hekke, who's gone back to Brighton after a player of the season campaign on loan last year. So those are 2 that absolutely have to be replaced still, particularly with the injuries now that are being hit by to Scott Wharton and Hayden Carter. Ash Phillips still a bit up in the air in terms of availability for Reading, and Sam Barnes, even one of those coming through from the youth setup with a promising pre-season, who's suffered an absolute gutting sort of ACL that is going to keep him out for the rest of the season. So centre-back, they're just so low on options. That has to be an area. Beyond that, right back, I do think is one that could potentially be looked at in terms of maybe a backup for Callum Britton. He was withdrawn at half time on Sunday, and that sort of forced John Buckley into that position out of his more natural central midfield role. Maybe that would have been different had Joe Rankin Costello been available. He was sort of in action for the under-21s, which is a bit of a feature, and under Thomason in terms of getting the fringe players game time when they're not in the first team. But even he's not necessarily a natural in that position. And he did actually, I think, pick up a knock in that under-21s game as well. So that's another position where it sort of has maybe been exposed that they are a bit short on still. So that is somewhere I wouldn't mind them looking at all. Maybe say a Cyrus Christie as a free agent, because again, each one where Britton is likely to start when he's fit and available. So you don't want to be spending too much money on a second choice. And that sort of lack of potential game time makes loans hard. So maybe the free agent market is the best to look at in that respect. So as I say, someone like Cyrus Christie also brings a great deal of useful championship experience. Another one is centre forward, as I sort of mentioned earlier, when Brereton Diaz sort of had that dip in form in the second half of last season. That coincided with a really sort of poor run of results for Rovers. So someone who could again get those goals in his absence. So maybe, I don't know, someone I'm thinking of, say a Lewis Graben. Obviously, that it sounds like there's interest in him from elsewhere, but that is one I'd really like Rovers to look at. For starters, as we say, we know he can score goals in the Championship, but also at his age, it wouldn't be a long-term one, really. So that would sort of give the chance for him to fill the void, say for this season, and that would then allow young Jack Vale the chance of a loan spell where he can really sort of get used to a bit more Football League experience over the course of this season, with the chance to then come back into Ewood Park and maybe hit the ground running with a bit more confidence potentially next season. So that too is sort of an area where I think centre forward has to be certainly addressed, especially when you consider that no one was brought in after Adam Armstrong's departure last summer, and then again possibly another central midfielder or two, because as we sort of say, as well as Rathwell, with there's Bradley Johnson and Jacob Davenport, who both moved on in that position. So there is an argument that it would potentially be a bit of a risk with only Tyler Morton coming in that position. So there's definitely, in my opinion, still quite a bit of work that Rovers could potentially do in the transfer window.
Definitely a positive that there's still 4 domestic loan slots left that Blackburn can use up with the clock ticking, I suppose, as we head towards the transfer deadline. I definitely like that Cyrus Christie shout to come in on a free. Is a player that I'm surprised still hasn't found a club at this point of the transfer window. Was very impressive in patches on loan at Swansea City in the second half of last season. So yeah, I think that would be a real coup if Blackburn were able to get him in. Talking outgoings, I have to ask you, Toby, do you think Brereton Diaz will still be at the club come the end of the transfer window? Obviously, with your heart, he will be, but what's your head saying at this stage?
It really has gone one way and then the other, and it keeps swinging in terms of both what I want and what I expect, if I'm being honest. I mean, at the start of the summer, there was sort of no way I thought that he would be staying beyond the current transfer window. Obviously, with the sort of attention he seemed to attract with his form last season, which was completely understandable, and the fact that he is into the final year of his contract now, which sort of makes this obviously the last chance to receive a fee for him. So in that sense, that there was a bit of me that was resigned to it and almost felt it would be the right thing, given the funds that Rovers could sort of receive for him and what they could then do with that in the rest of the transfer window. But then sort of that interest hasn't really emerged, and that has made me think maybe there is a chance that he will be staying. And would that be the worst thing? I think the fact that Rovers have started as well as they have on the pitch almost now makes it more appealing for him to stay and maybe take that chance on him going on a free next summer, because as I say, you look at that situation. No one knew at the start of the summer when it seemed almost certain that he would be leaving, that Rovers would start as well as they have. But now that they have put themselves in this position, you can almost sort of get that sense of there is the potential for something to happen this season. And if it is going to happen, you have to keep your best players. And obviously, Brereton Diaz is one of them. And there may well be an argument that if nothing emerges by the time the window closes, then he may well be tempted. It would be crazy for Rovers not to put another contract offer on the table to him. And there may even be that hope of when you consider how well Rovers have started, he may well look at this now under Thomason and think, actually, I've got a chance to do something quite special here and be a main man in a top 6 side potentially, and that could tempt him to sign another contract. And of course, it's worth remembering in that sense that he is still only just 23 years old, so another deal would certainly not sort of wipe out the possibility of him then moving on to the Premier League in a few years' time. I mean, who knows? He may well want to just see how this season goes and make a decision at the end of it if no move materialises before then. So it feels more uncertain now than at any other time in the transfer window. But as I say, you're either getting a decent fee for him this summer, or you're keeping a key goal scorer who would play a massive part in any sort of hopes Blackburn have of making the top 6 this season. So it's almost in that sense, one way or another, things could arguably work out quite well for Rovers with regards to Brereton Diaz now.
Yeah, it's a tough one in weighing up the pros and cons, because, of course, if he was to go in this transfer window, there's an argument the Rovers would have preferred it to be earlier with more time to reinvest any fee that they do recoup for him. So, yeah, it's going to be an interesting one to see how it pans out. Definitely a credit to the Chilean that he is putting in these high level of performances while his future remains slightly up in the air, at least. We're going to be moving on to our conclusion in the next section. So finally, Toby, Are Blackburn Rovers the real deal? For me, I've translated that to mean top six contenders. For me, I think that would be a very impressive season. Again, the first under Thomason. After the start that was made, obviously tricky to say with maybe a fortnight and 1 day left in the transfer window. Are you expecting a top six push to materialise this season?
I think that first of all, I'm going to agree with you there. I do think top six would be a sort of a success for Rovers, given when Thomason was appointed, it felt like this was a long term appointment in terms of how Rovers were looking with this. So almost say reaching the playoffs this season would arguably be ahead of schedule for them. So that would make it a huge success. In terms of whether or not it does happen, I think that massively depends, as we've been talking about, on what Rovers do in these next 2 weeks in the transfer window. Clearly, I think this squad, or this starting 11 they've got now, as we've seen over these 3 games so far, are good enough to compete for that. But right now, you sort of look at how out on their feet that side was at full time against West Brom on Sunday, and how ravaged by injury they are. There is just no way that with this current squad of players, they have the depth required to cope with the demands and the injuries and the suspensions to keep up producing those results week in, week out, as they would need to do if they are going to make that top six. So it's, as I say, it's all down to if they can get the players to come in and fill those voids when required due to player absences, then absolutely it looks like there is the potential there for another playoff push. But if it is a quiet end to the window, maybe with just like we touched on, make just 1 or 2 more signings, then I think I would be quite worried about any sort of hopes of making a push for promotion this season.
A very important next couple of weeks then for Blackburn Rovers to capitalise on the very impressive start they've made under Thomason. So that brings us to the end of the show this morning on Football League World TV. Later on the channel at 4 p.m, we've got the EFL Tuesday night preview. Sam Rourke will be steering the ship for that one, so make sure you stay tuned for that. But apart from that, all that's left for me to say is thank you very much for joining me, Toby. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.